Welcome to Human Powered, the podcast about creating a high-performing agency or consultancy business. I'm Trenton Moss, and today I have Zoë Blogg, Managing Director of the search marketing and digital PR agency Reboot. Zoë, hello.
Hey, Trenton.
So, Zoë, you took over from the founders as Managing Director earlier this year. Now that you're running the business, tell me about how you define high performing within the context of Reboot.
It's been a bit of a shift actually recently. I've been doing some research around it in the last 6 months, but we've really moved towards outcome driven over output. And by that, I mean people that really own their results in their role rather than just like the execution of tasks day to day. So I guess what I'm looking for are people that are curious, quite self-aware, and very importantly, coachable.
And what are some of the things that you do to encourage your team to exhibit curiosity, self-awareness, being coachable?
Try to give examples in my day-to-day as well. So I find like modeling the behaviors that you're looking for really helps with the team. So I work especially on the coachable element to ask those questions myself. So for instance, if I had a one-to-one with someone, at the end I might say, how was that format? Anything you'd change in that to get more from this one-to-one? And that encourages people to follow along that way. And then in other areas that we work on, we have a wider Reboot wiki, and that showcases examples of where people are demonstrating these sort of behaviours. So something that we would lean on are epic values, which are quite cheesy saying epic, but it's just easy for the team to remember. And those values are energetic, persistent, inquisitive, and courageous. We work to be quite open about where we are celebrating those wins. And I'd say really encourage not just senior leadership, but the wider team to use our shout out channel on Slack to highlight when someone has identified and worked towards one of those values in their day to day. And people get rewarded for those. So a recent example, we are giving away a big spa day to the team. So we're looking for someone that's the epic person of the month and has demonstrated all of those values in the hope that, I mean, I want it myself personally, but they can work towards getting a big spa weekend.
Every month there's a new epic person. Tell me some of the things that people do in order to win that prize.
So as I said, the values are energetic, persistent, inquisitive, and courageous. And being remote, that last one for us in particular is really important. It's very easy to, I suppose, hide behind your desk, especially if you're quite new into the company. So that courageous element, by that I mean being bold, speaking up in a meeting, or I guess working to say if a process you're doing day in, day out isn't quite efficient enough, or it's slowing you down day to day, and you step up and make a change. So again, leading back to what I said at the beginning, looking for outcomes over outputs. It's great if a team member does their day-to-day job, but what's, I suppose, even better is that wider outcome that they achieve. So how did that support the client? How did it support the business? Or better yet, how did it change our way of working?
You talked quite a bit about moving from an output focus to more of an outcome focused. Tell me how you made that transition.
So it was something I worked towards when I stepped into this MD role 6 months ago. I was always quite in the weeds, and that's because my background is operations and I can't help but go away and fix something. So it really has been a shift in the last 3 months where I've run an outcome meeting with our senior leadership team, and that just includes our directors, so key directors across like growth and marketing, and it includes our head of department, so head of organic and head of digital PR. And in that meeting, at the beginning of those 2-week sprints, we call them, we async before we go in, and we outline outcomes we're looking to achieve across the agency in all of those different departments. And then it's my job as MD to decide the outcomes we're going to focus on for those next 2 weeks. And we're very public about that. We share those agreed outcomes with the wider agency, so that if they're starting to get priorities through with their foundational or BAU tasks, they can refer back to these wider outcomes and try to shift priorities in order to close those. So I guess an example output would be writing a press release for X client, and then it would be outreaching the journalists to land a link Whereas a wider outcome would be to complete a strategy for X football client that helps close the link deficit. But then I don't really mind how the team goes away and writes up that strategy and completes that strategy. It's the wider piece.
What's that like for you as a leader, having to step back away from outputs and allow people to just get on with it?
It has been really difficult, I'm not going to lie. I guess everything that's got me here where I am today has been by getting stuck in, and I'm known as a bit of a doer. So working to fix a problem, be it something across marketing, sales, or even in delivery. So taking that step back and trying to coach heads of or who were my peers before, so other directors, has been a real shift. I've been lucky enough actually to have a career coach. Someone came to me and offered that pro bono, and it's been a game changer. I think I was quite naive stepping into this role, being like, I'm in ops, I'm already talking to all the people, I'm already improving all the systems. It's, not going to be too much of a change for me. And yeah, it has been a real shift to not just agree outcomes, but decide what's important for the business right now and make those big decisions, because what I agree with the other directors to do and finish in the next 2 weeks does obviously have a real change on the business in terms of what we're focusing our time on. In operations, a lot of my focus was on the delivery and people, but something quite new to me is sales and trying to set those outcomes and strategies for our outbound team. So examples of agreeing what sectors we might go after, or very recently, I just signed off a really big budget for a conference. It was a brand new stream for us, quite a lot of money for us as an agency, for me to sign that off and agree that we would trial it. But I suppose a learning for me, my natural sort of instinct to get into the weeds, I instantly dove in and started mapping out a big Google sheet of all the events we could attend and who could go along and what the timetable would look like. And I started assigning growth managers to it. And then I did typical me and built out a whole sequence. So from Lemlist to start to finish, like what would we say? And then I had the growth managers on the call looking at this event plan and outbound sequence of deer in headlights. And I could see they all had their own views already. They'd already made a few notes. They already had ideas of what sectors they could go after. And I was almost like dictating from above my view. And it just took me a minute to just step away and say, actually, what did you have planned going into Q4? Have you already thought about this as we've wrapped up Q3? And I'm ashamed to say I was actually surprised. I'd done a lot of work and had some really solid views on sectors to go after. And we, worked together to shift that. And I filed away my event plan.
And it's so easy, isn't it, as the managing director, to want to get involved and to want to solutionize.
Definitely. I think I just get really excited. It's just in my nature. I get excited about fixing things. I get excited about new ideas. And there is room for that excitement. Like, don't get me wrong. I think it's good for all directors to have input and vision of where you want to go. But sometimes it's better to listen, and you can be really surprised at what I would say not just managers, but new staff members can bring to the team as well. Like for us, we've had some new marketing managers come in, and the additions they've made are things I'd never thought about. And had I just gone, all in with that event plan, it would be a very different approach to what we're actually going with.
You talked a bit before about working with your leadership team and how you've moved the team to a 2-weekly cycle of sprints. Tell me more about how you get the most out of your leadership team and how you make sure that as a group you're as high performing as possible.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's really important before going into any meeting that you've set the scene and provided a bit of context. So you mentioned there moving into a 2-weekly sprint, and that change in that sprint as well was the whole outcome thing I've been banging on about. So before, the view was that we would have a marketing meeting, a growth meeting, a delivery meeting, and they were all siloed, and I might pop my head into every single one. And I think to get the most out of a leadership team, you have to have buy-in from them and where you're going. So before I even changed to this 2-week sprint and the outcome focus, I got them all in a room and explained the issue I was having. So it would be me personally as MD, jumping into all of these different calls and repeating myself sometimes. And then from their perspective, I'm saying, you're not actually hearing what's happening over in growth. And we're all very silo as an agency. And that means everybody feels busy. And at the end, because we're a 4-day week agency, at the end of it, we don't really feel like we've achieved anything. So I think to get the leadership to work together, as I say, right at the beginning, before making any change, it's giving context, explaining some of the issues you're seeing and what you feel they might be experiencing, and see if they agree. And then, of course, I already had my own idea of what I wanted to change, but listening, seeing if they had some additions, which the sprint actually was from them, the 2-week element. So for me, originally, I was going to do it week on week. And it was an additional, like from this conversation with senior leaders, that we ended up doing 2 weeks. So at the end of the first week, it would be reflecting on where we're at within that sprint. Does anything need an additional priority push? And we move that way. I find an issue in agency land, especially, is meetings just become habit, and we go in them, we churn over the same old tasks and the same old updates, and we don't really, move anywhere again. So we do async before we head into the meeting. So everybody knows the meeting's at 10:30 on a Monday, and there's a ClickUp document. And in that document on that Monday, they fill in what their ideal outcomes would be for their departments and priority clients. A priority client could be it's new, it's large revenue spend, we're in deficit. The client mentions something on a call that's alarming or an opportunity. And then I go in, review their notes and suggest what I think the key outcomes will be. And we head into that meeting and again, do it together. So I might have organised that doc a little bit and suggested the outcomes, but we do agree them together. And it goes further than just a senior leadership team as well, in my opinion. So once they're agreed, it has to be shared with the wider agency.
One of the things you mentioned is the fact that you do this async before you meet up. And with so many businesses, the meeting is the thing. But for you, it sounds like you're being a bit more considered and trying to make sure that you get the most value out of all of you coming together.
I think that's fair to say, yeah. Something we encourage in Reboot for all levels is, before you head into a meeting, is the agenda clear? Have you prepped? Do you think it's a good use of your time? And it's totally fine and encouraged to say, I've got this meeting coming up. Zoe, I'm not sure what we're covering. I don't feel like we're ready to go into this 30-minute, hour-long session yet. And then I do encourage the senior leadership team to own those outcomes. So every outcome has a confidence level, one owner. I think it's so important to always have one owner, even if it overlaps slightly. And then they go away and run their own, we call them output meetings, with their departments. So they'll go away, highlight those outcomes to their teams. Say, for instance, in the senior leadership meeting, we decided that our health clients need additional work. We've had a lot of health clients come in and they all need additional support and strategy. They'll then bring that to their team in that department and they'll work on the outputs that reach that outcome. It's not to say that the foundations stop. They don't. There's always going to be your day-to-day, the tasks you're expected to get done. But what I've really found is these outcomes keep everybody aligned, everybody in the same direction, and people are more willing to speak up if they feel an outcome's not going to be completed in the next 2 weeks.
Sounds like a very simple, but also very effective model that you're working to there.
I've really seen the change and the improvement. I think one great example we've had really recently was our Geo playbook. So as I mentioned before, every team was having their own meetings. So in the marketing meeting, as you can imagine, they had a list as long as their arm. So many different things to get done, like Reddit, posts, new content, social media. And we agreed in the outcome meeting that in the next 2 weeks, the one thing as an agency we're going to get delivered is our Geo playbook. And that's a huge piece on our site, lots of chapters. I think it's like 8 chapters, over 12,000 words. And it was delivered in 2 weeks. That's from marketing, writing it up, SEO, checking it, graphics, doing the design, a post-launch promotion. And we've already got leads coming from it just because we set that as a very clear outcome in those 2 weeks and it was realistic.
And I'm curious, Zoe, if you're working in these 2 weekly sprints, how do you make sure that your activities aren't haphazard? How do you make sure that it's all tied together around a common longer term strategy?
So we have agency OKRs. I always accidentally call them OQRs, so I had to be careful what I said there. So it's objective, key result, and the objectives we tend to have for a year outside of finance. You'd have your finance goals, so how much revenue you're looking to achieve, profit margins, etc. That's the standard. And then we have roughly 4 OKRs, and they look at things like culture, sales, innovation, and perhaps something around like our general marketing machine or where we want to go as an agency. Those are there every year. We cover them in company collectives. They're in the bulletin that we have. So we have ClickUp as our project management tool. It has like a wiki section. And in that we have a bulletin and it echoes these OKRs every single week, really. We share that round on a Thursday. And our company collectives, as I mentioned, are at the end of every quarter. So it's sort of drummed into the team again and again where we're at with OKRs. That means the wider team know them. And from a board perspective, every single month heading into the board meeting, we'll add commentary and next to our OKRs. So we'd have examples of how close we are to closing them, if they need to extend, or if they're completely closed off in the first 2 months and we need to add an additional one.
So I think you're saying that you have these OKRs to help you for the year. What about even more long term? Do you not have something like a 3-year plan?
No, actually, we don't. So I think many agencies, or me as an MD, have been asked by a lot of my peers in the space, what's Reboot's 3-year plan? What are you getting to? It's quite a common question. I get it in interviews a lot as well when people come in and they'll say, have you got any questions for us? What's Reboot's 3-5-year plan? We don't have one. We have an annual plan that we focus on. And a reason for that is 3 years for us felt quite vague. So when I joined the agency, actually nearly 3 years ago, I set a 3-year plan and ambitions and goals. And I think actually on reflection, especially in the search landscape, things shift so rapidly. And for us, digital PR is having a massive resurge. There's a lot of demand. If I review back my 3-year plan, I had PPC in it. I had data marketing in it. So what we've found is actually setting a very clear annual plan with revenue goals, profit margins, and these objectives, as I mentioned, around growth, culture, innovation. That's enough for the team to take on. And it really keeps them aligned and doesn't get them thinking, oh, that's 3 years in the future. That doesn't really affect me. So we've done that for the last 2 years. And we've had revenue growth by 15% year on year. And we're sitting at a healthy 30% EBITDA margin. So I would back the year plan and the wider sort of outcome sessions.
You mentioned before about the fact that you work a 4-day week. How does that work?
We work 4 days, which means we have Fridays off. So we don't do longer hours. We don't try to condense all of our days into 4. It's a really clean cutoff. So we actually work 34 hours a week if you include our hour-long lunch breaks. I think for a 4-day week to work, it's really important that the team know what would be expected inside a 5-day week. And I have actually done a few separate talks on it, but the big thing for me is Parkinson's law. So you fit what you've got into the time that you have. Realistically, I don't think I could fit my entire week into 1 day. Otherwise, I would do that and have all the sort of week off as my weekend. But 4 days is definitely doable. So as long as that, I suppose, bar is there and the expectation on output is there, what you're expected to achieve in your day-to-day, we've seen real success from it. So in terms of specifics around the success we've seen, a big piece has been productivity. So our utilization rate has rapidly improved. I think an agency standard is probably around 60% when all in is realized. We're working more at a 75% utilization margin. We don't tell the team, the wider team, what their utilization targets are. I know for many roles, different agencies, you might set it at 85 to 80 for more of an exec role, and that will drop down. I'm talking about a flat utilization rate across the entire team. That's gone up. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of our plans, where we only have a focus on 1 year at a time over 3 years, and I mentioned our revenue increases there, I put that down to this 4-day week as well. I've actually, over the last couple of years, dropped headcount. When I joined the agency 3 years ago, we had 92 staff members, and just through certain performance plans, natural drop off as well, not increasing that, we're now on 46 billable staff members. So I really do believe that's come from clear expectations, very tight, day-to-day working, and also the sort of downtime the team has on a Friday through to Monday. So they're coming back on a Monday really sharp and raring to go. I really do think that pays off.
And I think also what you're giving the team with this is more thinking time, more time to spend mulling over what's going on and coming up with new ways of doing things.
Definitely. And I see that play out as well. So I think for a 4-day week to work, you really have to model it. So as I was saying at the beginning, like you model behaviors and coaching. Same goes for culture. And we're lucky enough to have founders that experience difficult working places. They wanted the best for the team here, and they act by example. So they're not online on Fridays. It's very clear to our clients. And that means with that time, I've seen the team, on a Friday, say they're getting a train down to see their family. Or for me, it's when I'm getting my nails done on every other Friday. I'll have some bright idea and I'll just ping it into Slack. We have a bit of a idea dump channel. You might get the odd thumbs up if someone's seen that, but then you'll come in on a Monday and you will really see that so many different team members have had blue sky thinking time, from walking their dog, going to the spa, reading a book, whatever it is, clocking something on LinkedIn, and they'll drop it into this channel. And then we can decide if that's what we want to action on Monday. So one example we saw a team member come up with was listicles. So it seems quite old school, but there was a lot going on LinkedIn around listicle examples and how that's helping people surface in AI overviews, and the back and forth around how that's quite, as I say, an old school tactic. And they were thinking what if we could invent a tool where it automates these listicles quite quickly. So you plug in, for example, top 10 digital PR agencies in Leeds, you plug in a little bit about your company, and this tool spits out a listicle framework and can send it out to your network of domains. That just literally came from they were sitting at home reading about, in particular, the change in AI search and how that grows. We've also had more granular examples, I suppose, from digital PR, where one of our digital PR managers was literally sitting next to her boyfriend while he was working and she was off on a Friday, just mulling about the house, hearing him vape, the sound when he's vaping and everything, and thinking how gross that is. And then she had the idea to swab his vape. So she got a bunch of swabs sent to the house, and she swabbed around funnel mouthpiece for bacteria and E. coli, and it came back really gross. You don't want to know the outcome of that. And we've just done a PR campaign for a vaping client of ours around bacteria, etc. So that came from just being at home, sitting around family members.
We've been talking a bit about your team. I know something that you do with your team is the 9-box grid. Can you tell me a bit more about what that is and why you use it?
Yeah. So the 9-box grid is a quite well-known, I think, talent mapping exercise that we use. And essentially it's a table with 9 boxes. On the bottom, you've got performance, so from left to right, how strong they're performing. And on the left-hand side, you have potential. So, at the bottom would be low potential, and at the top would be higher potential. And what you end up with is, in the middle of this box, a core box where you'd expect most of your team to be. And so they're in the middle of their potential and of their performance. And then on the top left, right at the top in the left corner, you might have high potential but very low performance. And that's an area that I like to keep my beady eye on to see if anyone's falling into that. So how we use it as an agency is every quarter I sit down with the head of department and I get up their 9-box grid for their department. We don't share it wider, so it's not an agency-wide tool, it's just shared with head of departments. And we'll see it from the last quarter, it's in a ClickUp whiteboard where everybody is, and we'll say, right, is anybody moving? And you'd expect that most people say they're at risk. So they're in the bottom left, low performance, low potential. You've managed to work on a bit of a plan with them, be it a PIP or just a general soft training course, and you've managed to move them into core. Or, for instance, you might have someone right in the top right, which is higher potential, higher performance, and they've been there for, 6 months. It's the second quarter you're doing it. And you start to think to yourself, oh gosh, are they going to get a job offer from somewhere else? Are they getting a bit tired of being our A player all the time? Are they ready for a promotion, for instance? And try to be quite proactive about it and beat them to it, because I find people love when you've noticed their output that way. So we use it really to inform probations, but also just to support with performance, to make sure everybody is a core player. And sometimes, as I mentioned, the one I like to keep an eye on is that top left of high potential and low performance. And it's quite rare that you'll have people in there. But we recently had someone that was in more of our growth team, so more of a sales type role, that just had really high potential, good emotional intelligence, great at, I suppose, creativity and getting ideas across in pitches, but low performance in that sales weren't really coming through and they weren't that, extroverted really. And we sat down and thought, we don't want to lose this person. Like they definitely have fit in with Reboot and the culture, and they've got a lot of good value and contributions. It's just on paper, when I look at those targets we've got, we're not hitting them, we're not moving the needle. And long story short, they're now our head of digital PR. And our PR team is firing on all cylinders. So if we hadn't mapped that out at a director level, we really could have gone down a different path and it would have been a different story. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of the 9-box grid exercise. What I've also seen are people sitting more on that performance side where, I mentioned they're quite high performance, quite steady potential, and they've come up in that 6-month review. And I'm thinking, are they getting slightly itchy feet? They're always sort of top towards that leaderboard. And I do like to try and be quite proactive with offering people promotions or alluding to the fact, they should take that next step. But what I found is, not everybody is me. And while I'm quite ambitious and looking to that next step, when you actually take a moment to ask someone, so I'm not saying to share this 9-box grid, but just having that conversation with someone. Look, we've noticed your contributions. We've noticed how much you're helping the team and the general department. Have you given any thought to those next steps? Rather than me just saying, congratulations, you're a senior manager. We found that in our 4-day week especially, we attract a lot of parents. And actually, many of our top performing mums, because it is mostly mums to be fair, that have come back in after time off from mat leave, don't want that next step. They'll be more than happy and content in the role that they're comfortable in, they're doing an excellent job in, they know they're adding good value to the company, they've got time to, then switch off and spend time with their family. And me trying to push that next promotion on them, although, very happy to hear that feedback, was not actually the route they wanted to go down. So again, it's opened up conversations to just have that conversation with the person in the first place and then go from there in terms of what we're going to do about that.
So it turns out someone with low potential, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If the performance is high and that's what they want to keep doing, that's a win-win.
It's a win-win. It's good for the business. Excellent to sort of lead by example and help coach new people coming into the team, because sometimes they're very willing to do that. It's just not the additional responsibilities perhaps that you might find of taking on a larger client or line managing a large team. So yeah, we've really found that, as I say, it's just a couple of examples there where it's really identified things that I perhaps would have missed had I not sat down and finished this exercise.
One of the things that's quite unique about Reboot is the fact that you are a fully remote team. Tell me a bit about how you keep the team aligned around, common culture, common purpose and common vision.
I'm not going to lie, it's not easy being fully remote, spread across the country. I'd say a real positive that comes with it is we attract A players. So it's not just the remote stance, it's the 4-day week as well. We're often inundated with applications. And that is a real pro for our culture because we're always leveling up that way. You are always working with the best. I'm always surprised and excited, I suppose, by the ideas coming from new people that have joined and our heads of department. So that really helps to inform the culture. There are times where you need to get together, get your heads together and be it brainstorm, or for instance, literally next week I'm going down to London on the 11th and 12th for 2 days to work through our strategy with the team. And we have Hubble, which is kind of like a Deliveroo for co-working. You get credits and then you can pick your Hubbles. And then I have been trying to work on the community feel. So for a bit of context, every year we run employee surveys. Every March we run them, and one thing that often scores more average towards low would be, I suppose, sense of community within Reboot, and it's something we've been working on. And we just did a pulse survey as well, so it was coming out high in terms of enjoyment in the role, getting along with colleagues, confident speaking up in meetings, but that just general feel of belonging was relatively low. So something that I personally thought was a great idea was trying to give £20 per head in October to go on a walk, but you have to do it together. In November, it would be a class, and in December, it would be an activity, and just really trying to encourage people to be together. So I said, if you organise a walk, say, for instance, in the Peak District, and you go for a pub lunch together, you can all claim your 20 quid per head. And October went on, and nobody was really booking it in. It was me wanting to go to the Peak District. And I just turned around and said, does everybody just want pizza? And it was a resounding yes. Everybody just wanted a code to get Domino's pizza, join a call at 4 p.m. and chat together over a slice. So yeah, I think sometimes it's the more like the micro moments rather than trying to force fun. But that is definitely something we are still working on as a team.
Zoë, you've talked a lot about all of these things that you do for the team to try to get that high performance. When you're doing all of that, what's the impact that you see on client relationships?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think client relationships for us, we've worked quite hard on retention over the last year and a half. And I suppose, as you would say, like, you might leave a boss rather than leaving a job. We've found that clients are likely to leave account managers rather than the agency itself. And we've spent a lot of time working on, we've smashed X KPI. This is the impact, which, don't get me wrong, is important. But we were still losing clients despite showing really good work. And when I dug into that, a lot of the time it was because of rapport. And I was thinking, we've done a lot of that as a remote agency, as I mentioned, trying to work on this community feel, trying to make sure people are courageous enough to speak up in meetings. We should be doing that with our client base as well. And it was actually a podcast you did with Harv, probably like a year back or so. You mentioned the payoff of dedicating a lot of your time into coaching the team with how they speak to clients. And we took that up. So every Thursday for half an hour at 10:30, everybody that's client facing joins this session. It's led normally by me or our head of digital PR. And we will just pick up something, because something always happens, something that's happened that week, be it like a negotiation over a contract or, interest in a new service. And we'll walk through how we might approach that together. And very recently, we did some micro sessions because our founder actually owned a furniture company before starting Reboot, which is a whole other story. And he mentioned about the money he was spending on an agency and just never hearing from them and how that felt, even though they were doing good work. So we just worked through and practiced together some things that we could be saying to clients outside of impact, like, oh, I saw you going to Brighton for Brighton SEO. Here's some great food spots that I know of. Or, oh, you mentioned, going into your board meeting talking about AI search. I know you're not doing that with us, but here's a tool I'm testing. I can get you a free trial if you want one. So just trying to add value outside of that, trying to make sure we're jumping on calls. And our retention as a result has really started to uplift. And we're heading into 2026 trying to hold an 85% retention target with our clients, which for us is a big shift compared to the years before.
Wow. Sounds like all of this is having a really big impact.
Definitely, yeah. We've had comments from existing long-term clients that they've seen the shift, and also from our team just in general for the training as well.
Zoë, thank you so much for joining today, and thank you so much for sharing so many of the fantastic things that you're doing at Reboot. Tell me a bit about what's next for you and indeed what's next for Reboot.
So we actually just won Best Global SEO Agency of the Year, which is huge for us. So I know there's many awards that agencies go after and, win campaign awards, but this one for us has been one that the whole team really took pride in. Like, the buzz from the team over the last couple of weeks has been huge. And it's something we do plan to ride into 2026. So we are the best SEO agency. What does that mean in our processes, in our services, how we price, how we talk to clients? So we're doing a lot around that. For me, myself, I am finally settling in this MD role, as I mentioned, working more towards this outcome focus, working with my career coach. I'm really happy with the A-player team that we've got, the processes that we've built. I'm actually coaching our ops manager into that sort of head ops role as well. So that's a personal win for me. So really, it's just perfecting the model. My budget for 2026 isn't too ambitious in terms of growth. It's more about showing that this model really works and identifying how we can scale it into the future.
Fantastic. Zoë, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here today. I've learned so much listening to you and listening to all of the wonderful things that you're doing at Reboot. Thank you.
Thank you, Trenton. It's been great to chat to you.
You've been listening to Human Powered, the podcast all about creating a high-performing agency or consultancy business. Thanks for tuning in.